welcome back to Newsroom. Chella Smith here, your Middle East U.S. entertainment news on YouTube. I'm airing on Fridays. I bring you the latest on reforms and economics based on reports put out by the Middle East news media outlets. I do this weekly review and it's based off my interest. Thank you everyone for joining me. We don't have a lot of news this week, so I won't be long. I'd like to give a special thanks to the Iraqi news outlets for all their great work keeping us updated. They have been a blessing. Let's get right into our news headlines. Mawazine News reports a member of the Parliament Economy and Investment Committee, Muhammad al-Zayadi, confirmed that the Parliamentary Committee will anticipate the Ministry of Finance actions to pump currency into the market. Al-Zayadi said in an interview with Mawazine News that during our question to the Ministry of Finance, we tried hard to find a solution to the issue of the delay in approving the budget, but the finance response to the food security law contained many problems, adding that the government must cover the streets with a certain liquidity, regardless of the arguments, and there will be a strong oversight from the House of Representatives in regards. That Baghdad Obsol's informed source reveals on April 13th a clear and explicit position by the U.S. administration towards the extension of the current president of the Republic, Barham Saleh. The source told Al-Masala that the U.S. administration informed the head of the Kyrgyzstan Democratic Party, Mauser Barzani, that it is in agreement with the Iranian trend to extend Saleh. The source quoted the text of the U.S. letter to Barzani, stating that Washington is different with Tehran in almost all files, but agrees to extend Barham Saleh as the president of Iraq. Baghdad Ashart al-Assad News reports Iraqi President Barham Saleh warns against the continuation of the current political crisis that the country is going through, about 6 months after the elections, considering that it could lead to dangerous results. In a statement marking the 19th anniversary of the U.S. occupation of Iraq and the overthrow of former President Saddam Hussein, Saleh calls for a new political contract, saying that April 9th is also the occasion to review overall political performances in the country after experiencing of 2 decades. He explains the need is urgent today to meet the demands of all Iraqis for a rational rule that transcends the mistakes and loopholes of experience, and to address the structural defects in the system of governments that requires real and radical reforms that cannot be postponed. This will not be achieved without restoring the confidence of the people as the source of authority and its legitimacy through exceptional and courageous measures that place the interests of the citizens above all else. The anniversary of the fall of the previous regime this year coincides with the most serious case of political obstruction suffers by current regime in Baghdad. Although more than 5 months has passed since early elections in October 2021, the political forces were unable to elect a president of the Republic or form a new government in light of the division over whether it will be a national majority government or a consensus government. Shafak News reports the World Gold Council announces a decline in the world's gold reserves after the central bank of countries sold quantities of it within a month, indicating that Iraq has not provided any update on its gold possessions since last October. The council said in the latest schedule for the month of April, this month, the world's gold reserve declined by 6 tons as a result of the central bank selling quantities of it, noting that Uzbekistan is the largest seller in the months as it reduced its gold reserves by 22 tons to 339 tons. And Kazakhstan sold 5 tons, Qatar sold 6 tons, and Mongolia 1 ton, and Germany 1 ton. He added Turkey demonstrated net purchases, adding 25 tons to its gold reserves, India buying 2.6 tons during the month, while Ireland, the only active buyer in the development market, adds 1 ton of gold to its reserves. He points out that Iraq has not provided any update on gold holdings since October 2021, but it remains its global position at 39 out of 100 countries listed in the table with the largest gold reserves, bringing its gold holdings to 96.4 tons, which represents 9.3 of the rest of other reserves. Baghdad today, Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi reveals during an interview with the American newspaper, The Washington Post, that he wants to diversify the democratic Iraq, and the newspaper describes this as a noble vision, but it is fought with dangers, as Iraq now and always stands as the fault line between Iran and the world. Al-Kadhimi said during an interview that this took place in an office in Baghdad with the American newspapers. Our region cannot fight more wars. Al-Kadhimi hopes that the United States and Iran can agree on a new nuclear deal as a first step towards easing tensions. We need an agreement that brings some calm to the region, he says. Al-Kadhimi made it clear that he wanted to continue U.S. support, including a small non-combat military presence, to help stabilize the country. He says, "We really believe in our relationship with the United States as a country that helped us get rid of dictatorship and also develop our democratic system." The report noted that Iraq, which lies in the focal point between Iran and the Arabs, remains the most impressive but the most frustrating challenge in the region. She reinforces the reason for this being a large and fertile land blessed with energy and other resources, with a dramatic but fluctuating population mix of Shiites, Sunni, and Kurds. For the country, this is Al-Kadhimi, the leader strongly supported by moderate Arab states such as Iraq, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, but he also speaks with Iran. She points out that the problem of Al-Kadhimi's and the American friends is that Iraq, for the time being, remains weak due to corruption, political fights, and Iranian interference. The Iraqis want a strong, well-managed country. On paper, this is now the parliamentary's majority for the coalitions of Shiites, Sunnis, and Kurds to form a new government, perhaps with Al-Kadhimi remaining as prime minister. But forming a government has been impossible so far with the difficulties faced by political process in Iraq since October elections until now. The report stated that the Iraqi corruption and Iranian manipulation reinforces each other. He recalls that when he became the prime minister in 2020, Al-Kadhimi tried to clean up the corruption by appointing the most powerful Iraqi policeman to run the crime commission to follow up on murders and corruption. But under Iranian pressure, an Iraqi court last month ordered the arrest of Abab Rafif. Al-Kadhimi refused execution of the order, but on the scene was the pressing. The Washington Post continued, the situation could get worse if the nuclear talks between the United States and Iran collapse, leaving Al-Kadhimi in an uneasy position in the middle. As a U.S. official warned that if the talks collapse, Iraq is likely to be the victim. When I asked the American sage Al-Kadhimi what is his agenda, what would it be if he was to get the new mandate as prime minister, he immediately answered, strengthening Iraqi sovereignty so that way he can resist external attempts to manipulate the country. His second goal is to impose the state monopoly on arms. He continues to discuss the economic reforms and privatization. The newspaper concluded Al-Kadhimi's goals are the right ones, but he will need help. This brings us back to the United States, which is one of once Iraq's best and worst friend in the recent decades. According to Baghdad today, Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Mustafa al-Kadhimi, received Sunday afternoon the commander of the U.S. Central Command, General Michael Kurilla, and his accompanied delegations during the meeting. They discussed security and military cooperation between Iraq and the United States, the course of war on terrorism, the pursuit of the defects, ISIS remnants, and the latest operations of the Iraqi armed forces in its regards. They discuss strengthening joint security corporations, especially after the role of the international coalition against terrorism moved to the stage of assisting in building Iraqi military capabilities and providing advice, support, and empowerment. General Michael Kurilla stressed his appreciation for the combat level of Iraqi security force, the high performance indicators, and their abilities to implement their new field task, and to invest in the air capabilities provided by modern Iraqi Air Force aircraft. Shafak News then reports the World Bank has lowered its growth forecast for countries in the Middle East and North Africa next year, according to the reports put out yesterday by the bank. In a report, the bank expected Saudi economy to grow this year by 7% of the GDP before declining to 3.8% in 2023. In general, the World Bank expected the economy of the Middle East and North Africa to grow by 5.2% in 2022, which, according to the bank and reports, is the fastest growth rate since 2016, reinforced by that the oil exporting countries will benefit from the proceeds, which he describes as the unexpected raise in oil prices. But the report pointed to other challenges represented by the growth risk of inflation as a result of tightening of monetary policies globally, the unpredictability of the development of the corona pandemic, the continuation of disruption in supply chains, and the rise in food prices. The report added that the depreciation of currencies in some countries of the region caused an increase in inflation pressure, which has already been affected by the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. It is likely that some countries in the Middle East and North Africa will extend the terms of existing debts or issue new debts instruments. Baghdad Absles reports the first Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Hakeem al-Zamili, announces on Tuesday, April 12th, a request to the government to send a 2022 budget. Al-Zamili said in a statement, followed by the House of Representatives, that will ask the current government to prepare and send the 2022 budget. The Deputy Speaker, Shakwan Abdul Ahmed, confirmed earlier that Parliament is continuing its work and performing its legislative and oversight tasks as it's awaiting sending the current year budget. Baghdad Magazine News reports today that the Iranian negotiating teams announced in Vienna talks that the negotiations with the European delegations, in addition to the United States, has stopped. A member of the Iranian negotiating teams, Mohammad Marandi, says that the Americans suddenly changed their behavior and orientation in the Vienna talks, and now the negotiations have stopped. Marandi adds that the internal pressure from the opponents of U.S. President Joe Biden and supporters of Israel halted the pace of progress that was previously seen, especially at the end of the talks. The previous rounds of talk to revive the nuclear deal was concluded in Vienna, and in the rounds of talk, Iran presented two drafts that the Western countries described as aggravated and unacceptable. That's all for this week's Newsroom Weekly Review, your Middle East U.S. entertainment news on reforms and economics. I try to bring you all the latest Dinar news without having to keep up with all the different outlets. I'm Chella Smith, Newsroom here on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my content, give me a thumbs up. Shout out to Currency 365 for his continued support. If you want to learn about stocks or cryptos, you can join him and his crew for the most recent updates. You can find him on YouTube or Patreon. Again, just a friendly reminder, I will be taking some time off, so I'll be absent the next two Fridays, the 22nd and the 29th. I want to wish everyone who celebrates Easter a happy celebration, especially those little guys and gals. I'll be praying for great weather so that way they can have fun Easter egg hunts. I know I'll be doing an Easter egg hunt for my grandson. Always special finding those golden eggs with the money. And that's it for this week's Newsroom. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone. If for some reason we have an emergency RV, I'll do an update from vacation, but it looks like Iraq is also celebrating Ramadan, so it's the perfect time for me to take off as well. Take care, everyone. I'll see you guys when I get back. Make sure you join us Fridays, 4 p.m. with Newsroom Updates with Chella Smith Entertainment.